Well, welcome everybody to Chinwag Nation episode number 18. Stephen, you look so focused right now.
This
Oh,
is my
you were literally frozen
like.
on the screen. And I'm like, man, Stephen, you're so intensely focused. You're like, it's
Honest.
like game time. It's like game time. My glasses keep fogging up. Hey, episode 18. We're kicking off our first episode in our 5-part series on organizational development. We're going to be talking about lean and continuous improvement. And Steven and I are like super passionate about this idea and this concept. Although we know in some spaces, like saying the word lean or words associated with lean might not necessarily make us the most favorite people. So we understand that and are considerate of that as well. Um, this is Chinwag Nation, part of Third Place Leadership. Steven and I started this, gosh, back in January. I think it's been a while, and we are just passionate about inspiring leadership, lasting leadership communities. We believe in doing the hard stuff together. We are doing this just out of the just from a place of appreciation and respect for those in our community, and want to share our thoughts and our opinions and our mindsets as it relates to leadership and community building, and it's super important to us. So one of the things you can do to help us is comment, join us, engage with us, share our lives if you think they're worth it. And then the second thing is, if you know somebody who's just on their own trying to figure it out, whether in the leadership space or not, build community. Build lasting leadership communities. Reach out to folks. Nobody should have to do hard stuff alone, and that's really what we're about as well. And so we're going to share our opinions. They're not reflective of past, current, future employers. We're just Stephen and I having a good chinwag, having a good conversation about uh, subjects about organizational development, about leadership, about community, about culture. Things that we think are relevant to folks in those spaces. So, Stephen, lean, continuous improvement. Like, when did you first? I don't know. It's probably cheesy way to say it, but when did you first fall in love with lean?
Yeah, I know we sort of like prefaced this chat with, here are the kind of questions that we're going to tee up, and I was thinking about that, and for me, I had a brief period of time where I was working for a Fortune 150 company, and it was a parent company, and that parent company owned, like 200 other child companies, if you will. And many of those companies were manufacturing.
Hmm.
And so I I joined this company. I
Which is
walk in.
where which is where lean got its
Yeah,
where it
like
started.
traditional lean, right? Yeah. And in the Toyota manufacturing lean and Six Sigma lean, right? A lot of those are kind of like manufacturing practices. And I remember walking into this organization, and from day one, you could just tell that something was different, right?
Hmm.
This was an organization that lean was part of their business solution. Like, it was something that they lived and breathed. It was part of their values. And so you walk in and you see uh, visual daily management, you see standard work,
Okay,
you see.
what you got to break those down. Like,
I
what
know.
is visual
Well,
daily management?
I
What is
I'm
standard?
just I'm throwing big lean words out there as part of the story, but I know we'll get more into the details, right? But
Okay, all right,
you
all
see
right.
like words like kaizen, and you see Kanban and all this stuff. And I walk in, right, and very similar to what you're saying, Brian. Like, you have to explain it to the masses. I had no idea what any of that meant,
Hmm.
and I quickly started asking questions and found out that, this is a process. This is a tool set. This is a way, like a cultural way of doing things to continuously improve. And it wasn't until, I think, like, really getting out there and practicing it, to where I really started to realize the value. But once I started to do that, um, I became, I think, so enamored with lean. I would say, like, in love with lean, in the sense that this is such a tangible, cool, calculated, logical way of making improvements that I, eventually ended up getting my master's Six Sigma black belt, just from being able to apply that tool set and those practices to larger and larger projects over and over and over again, and to drive those results. But as part of that experience and working for that organization, right, you got to see firsthand sort of the things that are required to be able to implement lean well. We
Mm.
had executive sponsors who were all in, all the way up to the presidents of these companies, with people participating in these lean events, all the way down to the line workers on the manufacturing floor, right? And for those report outs, everybody would be in the room. Didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what you were within the organization. It was just really cool, man. What about yourself?
So, master black belt, does that mean that you can kick a board 16 feet up in the air via a roundhouse kick?
I don't know about 16 feet, and I don't know necessarily about the board kicking requirements, but I can definitely kick some boards.
Okay. Well,
Outside.
for those that might be watching, what does it mean to have a black belt?
Yeah, so there's especially the practice of Lean Six Sigma, which is a very specific tool set, a lot of which is very statistical. There's different levels of belt. I think there's a white belt and a yellow belt and a green belt that you can get from just taking courses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your black belt is where you, at least when I did it, you have to actually have some tangible sort of like project experiences similar to the PMP and pass an exam. PMP being the project management certification that everybody goes for.
Yeah.
The master black belt is similar thing, right? You have to have
Mm-hmm.
even more experience, right? And at least for me, there was coursework involved in a test.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Same
there's
with
various
mine.
stages of expertise, right?
I'm not a master black belt, but I have my black belt.
I'm sure you could get it.
Steven, I didn't realize that you were my master in terms of
Oh,
black
it took you
belt.
this long to realize that?
I not very. That's very. I think it's important for people to understand when we say belts, because we'll probably fill it out uh, in our time tonight, and kind of what that means. I explain it as like size of project, right? The higher you are in belting, the larger the projects you have, the tools to kind of manage through, and the experiences with it, right? Like an organization-wide project, typically a black belt. Several organizations be a master black belt, right? As an example, in terms of a project. And you asked me when I first fell in love with lean, and it was actually when I was first kind of going through the equivalent of a green belt, yellow course, and I learned about a guy named Taichi Ono. And I also learned about kind of the core principles of lean, which are respect for people, which I deeply value just because of my just inherent nature to build relationships with folks. Like I believe it's important to show respect for people. I may not always be great at it at times, just because the ego gets in the way, and so does just life. But I really believe in the importance of that, and continuous improvement, just getting a little bit better every day. But Taichi Ono, what fascinated me about him, thank you, whoever just said that. It just says LinkedIn users, so I'm breaking up quite a bit. Am I breaking up for you, Steven?
Yeah, I put it in our private chat that your audio is awful, buddy.
Oh,
And I wasn't sure if it was just me,
let
so apparently it's not.
me see if I can fix that. Hold on. All right, is that better?
No. It sort of started happening as soon as you like actually went live. Like your audio was great until then. And then you were kind of in and out. Now you just sound like a robot.
Oh, that's great. Well,
But yeah,
that's unfortunate. That's a bummer. Can you hear me now? Is it better now?
pretty rough, man. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still pretty rough. I mean, I was able to make out the fact that you were talking about Taiichi Ono, respect for people, continuous improvement, getting
All
better,
right.
a little bit better every day. But
If I can get closer to the router, if that'll help. How about now?
nah, man.
Well, I'm gonna tough it out and see if it gets better. I don't know
All
if
right,
I don't know if
I'll
you hear
try and
that.
translate.
What's
I said I can try and translate what I hear from you, but we can't really.
uh what's funny is I used to record this up where my off trailer is, and and it was just as bad up there. But so Taiichi Ono, he basically used to go and meet with everybody in an organization, right? He used to meet with every single person, the person cleaning the floors, the person doing administrative work, the person taking calls, people on the line, managers. It didn't matter. He showed respect for everybody in the organization, every single person. And because he truly wanted to understand how the organization worked, how the culture worked, how they solved problems, and uh, and get to the heart, right, the root cause of things. And he was one of the first folks that talked about the idea of like value add versus non-value add, right? He wanted to make sure that whatever improvements they came up with were value added improvements, right? And they got rid of as many non-value added things as possible because of the experience, right, for the worker, the people having to do the work, and also, as we know with Six Sigma, right, the output that came out of that, right, the product, right, at the end of the line. And so, I really loved that intent. And the idea of the Gembo walk, which is also, I know, another term. Is it getting better, Stephen?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, cool. Um, Thank you, whoever said that on LinkedIn, because it didn't come through, whoever that was. Um, and he I was when I was doing kind of just preparation for this episode, I had learned that he had this thing. I didn't know about this thing called the Ono circle, where he would draw a circle right on the manufacturing floor, and he would have people stand there for hours, not interacting, not saying a word, not trying to change anything, just observing, right, for hours.
Yeah,
And I wrote this down. He wanted people to observe the process as it was, which is the Gamba rock, right? He wanted people to be able to identify waste through their observations. He wanted to enable deep thinking, which is why I think um, lean is really challenging in non-manufacturing environments, because sometimes you have to sit there with a problem for a minute and chew on it and think about it and dig into it and watch it, gather lots of different types of data to truly understand the problem, and then implement the improvement. And the last thing, which I thought was pretty cool, because again, when we're moving so fast, and especially today when there's so much change in organizations, he wanted to enable awareness building.
yeah.
Right, he wanted people just to understand the surroundings and sit there for a minute. So, I mean, it's not like I don't know how it would be taken today for like, hey, I'm going to draw this circle and go stand in it, but it hits on some key points, right? Like the importance of just sitting with a problem for a minute, thinking deeply, identifying where there might be waste, looking for the value and observing the process where there's value and there isn't value. So I thought um, his approach to things, which was decades ago, right? This is I think in the I don't remember, it was like 60s, 70s. It was a while ago, and it's still relevant today.
Yeah.
His principles, and they still carry forward with lean concepts today. So but that's when I first fell in love with lean, and that the concept of lean and respect for people and continuous improvement. It's just really learning about him and his principles and his values.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's interesting because I think lean gets sort of a bad rep in a lot of different ways in the sense that one, a lot of people think that lean especially Six Sigma, is a practice just for manufacturing, where that's not really the case at all.
Yeah.
Does it work really well in a manufacturing way? Yes, things translate really well to a manufacturing floor. Even the wastes, right? When you talk about the 8 wastes of was the defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, was it transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing? Is that the 8 wastes?
Yep. Yep.
I mean,
And yep.
so like so many of those sound very manufacturing um, centric, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't apply to like a particular business, right? And
Yeah.
like even this concept of, you mentioned Gemba walk, like Gemba means go to the source, which I always loved.
Mhm.
It's like instead of us assuming and speculating and just using subjective information to make decisions about a process, like let's actually go and observe it and measure it, right? um, so going to the source is really cool, and then this concept of respect for all people, and then how you get every single layer of the organization to sort of participate is really it's really needed. It creates like a sense of ownership and an empowerment, right? I know there's a type of document that you can do to um, it. It's not like a project charter per se, but there's a one pager called an A3. And I remember when I worked for this organization, it was always important that everybody who participated in whatever type of event we were doing had to sign that A3.
I
And
remember that as well. Yeah, you
yeah,
had to sign it. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's like this like level of commitment, this level of ownership, this, like being a part of the process. We talked about um, the value of mattering, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know that their work is important, and everybody wants to know that the things that they're spending time on is also going to be important and come to some type of value add fruition, right? Um, so I just always kind of appreciated that about these
I
lean
think I
processes.
figured out who the LinkedIn person was, by the way.
Oh
They
yeah,
wrote woot woot in the chat. I'm pretty sure it's Tammy.
is it Tammy? I was wondering if it's
Pretty sure
somebody
it's
from my
Tammy
house.
LeClaire. But it says LinkedIn user, but woot woot
I don't know who
is
it
like an
is.
80% chance that it's Tammy who's joined us. And I saw my beautiful wife also joined us. Hey Joe. She's actually in the next room. She probably can hear me talking right now, and she's also chatting with me.
Joe,
That
stop
is the
taking away all the
that's the world we live in, folks. No, it's actually a good. What you just shared is a good segue into what was running through my head, and that was the first time that I mentioned 8 wastes. In I was just coming fresh out of my lean course, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk about waste and measurement. It's going to be so great. And I said 8 wastes, and they're like, are you calling my work wasteful?
advantage.
Right. So to your point about people want to feel like they're value added, that word waste has some negative connotations
Hmm.
associated with it, right? And so um I remember when we used to kick off workshops, and this isn't done as much anymore, but we used to build 30 minutes of the agenda to teach people definitions and terms,
Oh, cool.
right? And it was just like, here's what 8 wastes is, here's what 4-step problem or 8-step problem solving is, here's what uh, visual management means, here's what process mapping means. And we spend like 30 minutes just doing some level setting education. It is Tammy.
Here's
Doing
Tammy.
some level setting education. And that way, like when we mentioned 8 wastes, people weren't like, oh, why do you think my work's wasteful? It's actually, no, we want to empower you to identify where there might be waste. But there could be some sensitivities, right? Because if you say, well, hey, this whole section is non-value added, but that's attached to a person, right? Non-value added means like it doesn't have any value to the organization or the people involved. So you're in a room with your peers in a workshop, and they say your chunk of work's non-value added. So like there's some like I think important facilitation in that, and that's like no, it's not like we want to get rid of it. It's how can we make it better so it is value added, right? Are there things that we can do which will make your life easier and create more time for you, right? So there's some definite I think need to explain things and facilitate conversation.
Yeah, nowadays, well, at least in how I've used lean practices and continuous improvement practices, we have three categories, which is traditionally through the lens of the customer, but what's value add, non-value add, and then non-value add but required, right?
Yeah, right.
so,
By
so then
by
it's at least
law,
like, all
right?
right, we have to do
Yeah.
this. You can't get
I
away
call it
from
the I call it the business value add, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's yeah. No, it's important to consider, right? Like the law requires XYZ, but I remember my very first value stream mapping exercise,
Hmm.
and we were trying to identify how we could help this certain group of workers finish their work within the legally mandated period of time, right? You must get this work done in within 30 days. And they were always 15 to 20 days behind. And so, um, even though it was required, that doesn't mean you can't look at why it's required. So we actually went into policy, and the policy says yes, 30 days, but the law says 45. And so we were able to add 45 days or add 15 days to their mandate, and all of a sudden they were on time. Right. So, I mean, I think even though it's required or business value add, I think you can still identify opportunities, right, for improvement. Are you chatting? Because I can't chat.
Well, I can't respond to the public chat.
Okay. Are they? What are they saying? I can't see anything. If anybody's, is it just
I haven't
Tammy's
seen
last?
anything since Tammy.
Okay. Cool. All right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I
So, I
was
mean,
just
I think there's like this really cool opportunity, whether it's value add, non-value add, or business value add with lean and continuous improvement. And at the end of the day, if you're showing respect for people in the process and you're trying to get a little bit better, you meet right the you meet you meet the values of lean,
yeah.
and the idea. There is this other side though, and I'm sure you've experienced it, and or maybe you got into it, maybe being a new practitioner. But there's this purist side of lean and continuous improvement. I think this kind of goes along with any tool, right? Any certification, PMP, agile, lean, right? There's this purist mindset, and then there's just like, hey, like I'm just going to throw it in my toolbox mindset,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to lean, and I've experienced both. And I'll share a little story here, but I want to know like what's your thoughts like around this like purist versus flexible mindset when it comes to lean.
I mean, I think like anything, right? It takes a village and it takes a mix of people.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I'm not a purist. I could be. Like I know what it means and takes to be a purist.
Hmm.
Um, but I've been blessed to have been trained in many different types of methodologies around organizational development, in change management and continuous improvement, that I find they don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? You can do continuous improvement and you can do organizational change management. You can do organizational development. Um, Heck, thinking of Tammy, right? Human centered design, right? There's all these different types of approaches, and oftentimes, like my general approach is meet the business where they're at. Now, that being said, right? Sometimes if an organization wants to culturally adopt, say, continuous improvement, and they've decided at the very top of the organization that that's what they want to do. A lot of times, those who are put in place to implement said continuous improvement efforts are going to be tasked with driving results and showing a return on investment for that. And a
That's
lot of
true.
times, yeah,
That's
and
true.
a lot of times having purists helps, with confusion, right? It's like,
Mm.
this is what it
Yeah,
is, and
that's a
this is
good
how
point.
it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I would definitely say that my methodology is slower, right? It
Hmm.
involves developing relationships. It involves developing trust. It involves learning enough about the business to meet them where they're at, to minimize resistance, to be able to do these lean practices. And sometimes it also means developing enough trust with them that you can creatively approach continuous improvement in a way that they don't necessarily know that they're doing lean or continuous improvement, because they may
Sure.
already have a high level of resistance to lean or continuous improvement, because maybe somebody came in and pushed it really hard and then failed and failed and failed, or they had just bad experiences, right? Or thought it was going to be the next fad. But that takes time, and I also believe in like driving smaller results to snowball into larger results. But sometimes you have to come in. You got to show that return on investment. You got to drive that value, especially if you're working in a company that requires that level of scale, right? Where if you're making a couple of adjustments in the process, it could be the difference between $20 billion. Um,
That's true. I mean, yeah, there is a return on investment, I think, component to lean, especially when you get into the lean Six Sigma space, and especially
yeah,
in the manufacturing space for
yeah,
sure. I know there are some, lean teams out there where it's all about counting the dollars, in terms of cost savings and those types of things. And so that's a really, really good point. Yeah, I definitely think that you called it out when you said lean gets pushed really, really hard, and then it fails and fails and fails and fails. Um, Definitely have seen those scenarios, experienced those scenarios where you stand up a lean shop and you come in and the folks prior, right, were if you didn't have the certain sticker on your daily management board, it wasn't really a daily management board, right? If you didn't, pass this certain threshold for quality in terms of how you approach the tools, you weren't really a practitioner. And I think those are the types of things that actually work against the values of lean, and what it's trying to do, and what Taiichi Ono was trying to do, right? And I think he wanted to see the work, but you called it out perfectly. I think he also wanted to build relationships, because if he builds relationships, he gets good data, from the folks that he's talking with. If he doesn't take the time to build relationships, guess what? People aren't going to tell you, right, exactly what's happening, out of fear that it might come up in a negative report and you get bad data. And that's probably less and less optional these days with, lots of different tools out there, but it's still a thing. And I think it's really important to consider. I actually heard somebody say in the last few weeks, they said, it's more important, it doesn't matter how smart you are, it's more important to build relationships, right, than it is to show how competent you are, right, in a specific skill set or methodology or whatever. I think that speaks true with lean and building organizations in general. If you can foster an environment, since we're talking about organizational development, right? If you can foster an environment where people feel seen and heard and valued, but at the same time feel comfortable about talking about what's not working, you can build a really healthy and thriving, organization off of that. And I wrote down the importance of digging into these hard truths, because that's what we wrote up in um, our post for this time, and I couldn't help but think about like one of the hardest truths as it relates to lean and continuous improvement is culture. And is your culture set up in a way that you can do that? And I'll give a solid example to think about. So in Japan, right, where lean was part of the origination of lean, there were Americans as well as the Japanese, but they culturally, in a manufacturing space, they pull on this thing called the Ondon cord. And guess what? When you pull on that cord, everybody, to your point about everybody in the company for those daily huddles, everybody rallies around the problem. And even though you might have made the mistake or it's around your work, everybody's there to look at it. And that's normal. Culturally, that's normal,
yeah,
in that environment. Whereas in the United States, and this is a generalization, right? This is doesn't mean this is everywhere. So I want to throw that out there. But in the United States, if somebody comes and looks at your work, right, that's not a positive thing. Why is my boss in my cubicle? Why is somebody looking over my shoulder? Why does somebody want to come look at my work? Um, and so your culture, I think, from a lean standpoint, and if you want to develop your organization, has to be one in which it's okay to come look at things that aren't working well, even if it might be related to a person's work. And if that's not normalized, lean can be challenging to implement, right? Developing your organization can be challenging to do. And so that was definitely one of the hard truths that came to mind as I was thinking about, talking about the subject of lean and continuous improvement and organizational development. But what about you? What are some hard truths, Stephen?
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking about it, right? It it makes me think of a lot of the fears, valid fears around lean and continuous improvement. One of which is that you know people want to be human beings and not robots. At the same time, we're seeing artificial intelligence and robots becoming more and more a part of our everyday life. And so even, exemplifying that fear and then magnifying it when you actually go through and make the changes that need to happen, it's like, okay, so we cut our process time down by, I don't know, 60%. And then there's the hard truth of like, what are you doing with that additional 60%? Like you can
Or
only,
what's happening to the customer experience too,
yeah, the
potentially.
customer experience is a good point.
Mhm.
But it's like, are you, like how much can you expect out of your people? And then how are you tailoring, or I should say, even marrying that work with technology to, because keep in mind, like unused creativity is a waste in and of itself. So there's like a
Right.
human aspect of like getting the most out of your people. That is waste elimination in and of itself. Um, yeah. So like, how do you move forward with that? Right. Because that 60% time back, has to go somewhere if you want to really realize that value. And same with trying to measure value realization of, say, like cost savings on expenses. So say you save, I don't know, $30 million in a process, right? Well, where's that $30 million going, and how are you realizing that? It can be hard to measure sometimes. And so
Yeah.
that's a hard truth in and of itself, is as you're going through, and even if you're having these tangible wins and tangible results, like how are you able to tell that story, right? And then there's oftentimes, I would say, different wins for different levels of the organization. Having to like be able to tell your story to where it resonates with all the different stakeholders can be a little difficult too.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and it also makes me think about just the competency, right, necessary to even engage in measure. And what I mean by that, I'm not meaning that people can't measure or don't have the skill set, or it's not easy to do. But I remember coaching green belts. We had a green belt certification program. We would coach green belts. They'd go through coursework, and one of the things that was hard for folks to wrap their heads around was measurement. Just the idea of measurement, right? How are things going in the current state? How do I want them to go in the future state? And how do I measure in a way, um, right, that can actually show what's happening in a tangible way? And I think that's sometimes hard for people to wrap their heads around. At least that's what happened when we were going through the program. And so we did some things as simple as, just sit in a room and put, tick mark tracking on a piece of paper. Right? Just start counting. Right, is a great way to start measuring. Just start counting. And then the other was time. A good stopwatch.
Mm.
Um, and with third place leadership, right, we're really about keeping things concepts simple as well. So this is ideally for a, a broad group of folks. So um, if you're thinking about lean and building organizations, and you're even like just dipping into it and wondering about measurement, a great way to do it is just to start counting, or use a little stopwatch. Count time as well. But competency, willingness to dig into it, utilization of actually when you're saving the time, like that's, I don't know how often that step's taken, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Right? It's usually get in a room, do a workshop, current state, future state. What's the gap? How do we solve for the gap? But then you're right. Once you realize that value, not just documenting, you actually go and make changes to realize that value. Where you're putting that time and that money? That's a great question. Um, I don't know how often that happens.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a different level, I think, than how
for sure.
I've seen it implemented.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't touched on yet, and kind of bringing continuous improvement to the broader audience. I think it's really important to not get so intimidated by these terms of like Gemba walk and value stream maps and black belts and green belts and yellow belts and lean, right? And really think of like continuous improvement is built on this very simple reoccurring process called PDCA, just plan, do, check, adjust. Some people have changed adjust to act. I'm still an adjust guy. Um,
I thought
but
it was act to adjust. I didn't realize it was adjust to act. Okay.
yeah, I don't know. Depends on who you're talking to. But
You might have probably the third one out there.
I cannot hear a word you're saying, Brian, but it looks like you're really proud of it, whatever it is that you said. Um, but plan, right? So you've got the intentions to go do something. You're thinking about how you want to go do that. Then you actually go do it, right? And then as we're talking about this value realization, right? You actually have to check yourself. Like, are the things going on the way that you anticipated that they're happening? Do you need to make further adjustments, right? And then you adjust. And even as a part of that adjustment period, you start planning again, and you go do, and then you check, and then you adjust. And it's this never-ending cycle of how do you get better. And I've loved that. And oh, it looks like Brian's back now. I love the simplicity of that. I love the impact of the simplicity of that. And frankly, it's something that we do uh, all the time without even thinking about it. And so, at the very least, if you want to integrate continuous improvement into your life or your business or whatever type of working relationship you want to have, that PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust, is, I would say, the foundation of it all.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better.
You might have to finish this one off, Stephen. I heard plan, do, check, adjust.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. What I'll do, Brian, is I'll turn it over to our audience to see if anybody has any specific questions. They want to put that in the chat. There's usually a little bit of a delay between the chat and the things that we say, so I'll give it a couple of minutes here, see if anything comes in. But I'll try to put together some closing thoughts on the fly here, and that's continuous improvement. Oftentimes does get a bad rep, and a lot of times I think it's because people know that they need continuous improvement and they know that they could benefit from lean, but they don't necessarily know how to implement it. And I think making sure that you have the right expertise in house and the right tool set that matches the needs of your business, both within the process in which your business operates, as well as the culture in which your business operates, is really, really important. I think, understanding that continuous improvement can come in many forms. It can be these big, lofty value adds where you go out there, you invest a ton of effort and a ton of people time, and you go out there and try and take on these big, hairy challenges or political challenges within your organization. But then there's the other way, which is sort of the snowball method, in the sense that you as a practitioner, and a practitioner again can just be somebody who does the plan, do, check, adjust in their everyday life, takes a moment to get a little bit better today than they were yesterday, try to be a little bit better tomorrow than you are today, and that over time will continue to snowball. And then as you continue to have those little wins, make sure that you're celebrating, especially if you're celebrating the work that goes beyond just the ripple that is yourself, and could even be a small team, because culturally adopting means that people need to have desire for change, desire for continuous improvement, desire for transformation. And a big way to help with that is, beyond just building awareness, celebrating people for adopting the practice, or celebrating the wins, no matter how big or small. And then I would also say that, depending on the type of business that you're in, for example, right, I've worked in some pretty intense businesses where continuous improvement makes some very massive differences in time or cost savings. You'd be amazed at stretch goals, how far an organization can stretch, but just be aware that there is strain goals where you stretched a little bit too far. So be thinking about how you how you how you plan around that, right? How you talk about say like stretch goals versus your normal operational transformational goals, because transformational goals are going to take time, and oftentimes it's going to take adjustments and experimentation and scaling,
Yep.
right? And so being in the red or not necessarily hitting your target isn't indicative of necessarily a bad thing. There's
That's
tools
right.
that help you make adjustments, right?
That's right.
Uh, and that in and of itself can be scary, and it could be a big cultural shift. So
No, I love
um,
that.
be thinking of that with your transformational goals, with your operational goals. Yeah, you might want to give it a little bit more attention if it's in the red, if that's to keep the lights on stuff, right? But you have to think about how far you're pushing the business, and then how do you develop a safe space around that to make adjustments. And Brian, I think we can hear you now too. If there's anything you want to,
Yeah, I when you saw me go away, I'm like to my whole house. I'm like, hey, can you guys turn off all Wi-Fi on all devices, please? Because something's not working. And when that happened, I think it finally happened because I'm coming through. We're on Starlink, so it's been really great. But sometimes it doesn't get happy when there's a lot of people on it. No, I love that. It's such a good way to close us out. It actually leads up nicely to our next conversation, which is around appreciative inquiry, which is all about focusing on what's going well. And we'll get into some of the neuroscience and the brain science that's actually
yeah,
associated with that, which is it's another thing that I've fallen in love with. I have this dream of building a strengths based organization someday where it's just like it's all about finding people and what they're good at and putting them in a place to succeed
yeah,
in that space. So so it lines up well with what you're talking about, right? And that's designed for the people that are there, designed for the cultures that's there, and snowball like one person at a time can make a huge difference. The other piece that's been really valuable to me throughout my career, it's actually served me really, really well. And the times that I didn't thrive, in a workplace were times where I didn't do this very well, right? Just to have, self ownership, and that's partnering, and especially in organizations where like hierarchy means something, right? If you're in a higher position with a higher title, you typically have more authority and more decision making. I think partnering, especially if you're going to ask, if you're in a role where you have to ask for permission to do things like a continuous improvement project, or if you're familiar with these terms, right, a Kaizen event, which means an event to do some improvements about something, or process mapping. Um, like take the time to partner with your boss, right, your supervisor, your manager, your director, whatever it is, and just say like, hey, I have this idea for improvement. I'd love to partner with you on that. And that can go a long way, and that's another way to show respect for folks. And there are still organizations out there that aren't matrix, right? They're very hierarchical. And so I think in partnering, especially if you want the time, which is another hard truth, like time is super valuable, and these improvement events take time. But to Steven's point, they also give you time back, but you have to realize that through follow up. But I think it's partnership's a very important piece, to this conversation as well.
yeah. I mean, executive sponsorship is honestly foundational for
Yeah.
continuous improvement, and I think just throwing it out there with my experience, so often there's senior leaders in the organization that say, "Hey, we need to do continuous improvement. We need to do lean," and they will operationally say, "Go do that." But if they're not willing to sponsor and understand what that means, right? Because it does take an investment. It does take breaking down barriers. It does take having conversations with different stakeholders. Then it's just never going to work. Um,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean you can't adopt continuous improvement practices as your everyday life, and that continuous improvement can't be an individual thing. But if you truly want to do big business transformation type stuff, it requires sponsorship.
100%, without a doubt. I love that. Well, we'll see you maybe next week, maybe in a couple of weeks. We'll see. We're to be determined on this next Sunday, but we'll let you all know what's coming next. Thank you for joining us, those that could join us, and for letting me know when I sounded like garbly and or incoherent. So I appreciate that. And if you're watching us after the fact, I apologize for those internet breakup moments. And hopefully you got some value out of it. Love to hear from you. Message us, uh, uh, comment in the chat. We'll definitely reach back out. So wishing you all a great week. Build community. Don't let anybody do anything hard on their own. And